The morning sun streamed through the stained glass windows of St. Margaret's Cathedral, casting rainbow patterns across the marble floor where Victoria Sterling stood in her ivory silk gown. Her heart hammered against her rib cage as she adjusted the delicate lace veil that had belonged to her grandmother. At 6 months pregnant, the dress had been expertly tailored to accommodate her growing belly, though she still felt self-conscious among the 400 guests who represented the cream of London's elite society. Victoria's phone buzzed in her trembling hands. She expected a loving message from Sebastian, perhaps telling her how beautiful she looked or how eager he was to start their life together. Instead, the words on the screen hit her like a physical blow. "I can't do this. The merger is more important than whatever we had. Don't try to contact me." As the ancient cathedral fell into an eerie silence, as Victoria's bouquet of white peonies slipped from her numb fingers, scattering across the cold marble. Pastor Michael Chen, who had been waiting patiently at the altar, took a concerned step forward. The murmur of 400 voices began as guests craned their necks to understand why the bride stood frozen in the aisle. "Victoria, dear child, what's wrong?" Grace Winters, her elderly mentor and the closest thing to family she had left, appeared at her side. The 70-year-old former gallery owner had been the one to introduce Victoria to Sebastian's world of wealth and influence, believing she was helping her protégé find happiness. "He's not coming," Victoria whispered, her voice barely audible above the growing whispers of confusion from the assembled crowd. "Sebastian, he's chosen a business merger over our marriage." Grace's weathered face hardened with fury. "That coward! After everything he promised you, after getting you pregnant with his children?" The twins stirred restlessly in Victoria's womb, as if sensing their mother's distress. She placed a protective hand over her belly, feeling the weight of 400 pairs of eyes upon her. Among the guests, she spotted Sebastian's business associates, society wives who had never fully accepted her modest background, and journalists who would undoubtedly turn this into tomorrow's headline scandal. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria found her voice, though it cracked with emotion. She turned to face the congregation, her chin lifting with what remained of her dignity. "I regret to inform you that there will be no wedding today. Mr. Cross has decided that his business interests take precedence over his personal commitments." The cathedral erupted in shocked murmurs and barely concealed gossip. Victoria saw pity in some faces, satisfaction in others who had always whispered that the plumber's daughter didn't belong in their world. Grace took Victoria's arm firmly. "Come, let's get you out of here with your head held high." As they walked down the aisle together, Victoria made a silent vow to her unborn children and to herself. This humiliation would not define her. Somehow, some way, she would rise from this ashes and prove that she was worth far more than Sebastian Cross had ever imagined. Part 2. Rock Bottom and New Beginnings. 2 months after the wedding catastrophe, Victoria found herself standing outside Canvas and Coffee, a small art cafe in Camden that advertised for waitstaff. Her savings had dwindled to nearly nothing after Sebastian's lawyers evicted her from the Kensington apartment that had been in his name. The designer clothes had been sold, the jewelry returned, and now she wore a simple black dress that accommodated her 8-month pregnancy. The cafe's owner, James Morrison, was a gentle man in his early 40s with paint-stained fingers and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He listened without judgment as Victoria explained her situation, her hands nervously smoothing over her rounded belly. "I know I'm not the ideal candidate," Victoria admitted, glancing around the cozy space, filled with local artwork and mismatched furniture. "But I'm a hard worker, and I need this job." James exchanged a meaningful look with Ruby Martinez, his cafe manager, a tough, no-nonsense woman in her 30s who had raised 2 children as a single mother. Ruby's dark eyes assessed Victoria with the sharp intuition of someone who had faced her own struggles, "When are you due?" Ruby asked directly. "6 weeks," Victoria answered honestly, expecting immediate rejection. Instead, Ruby nodded approvingly. "At least you're honest. Most people would lie." She turned to James. "We could use the help, especially with the morning rush. And there's that storage room upstairs that we never use." James's face brightened. "The space above the cafe, it's not much, but with some work, it could be livable. Consider it part of your compensation package if you're interested." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. After weeks of cold rejections and barely concealed disgust from potential employers who saw only her pregnancy and lack of recent work experience, this unexpected kindness felt like a miracle. "I don't understand why you're helping me," she whispered. Ruby's expression softened. "Because we've all needed help at some point. I was 19 when I had my first kid, working 3 jobs to make ends meet. Someone gave me a chance when no one else would." The next few weeks blurred together in a haze of morning sickness, swollen ankles, and learning the rhythm of cafe life. Victoria discovered she had a natural gift for remembering customers' orders and preferences. Mrs. Patterson always wanted her cappuccino extra hot with a dash of cinnamon. Professor Williams preferred his espresso with a small glass of water and the morning crossword puzzle ready at his usual corner table. The storage room transformation became a community project. James donated furniture from his own flat, while Ruby contributed curtains and kitchenware. Local artists painted cheerful murals on the walls, and regular customers brought baby items they no longer needed. One evening, as Victoria arranged the nursery corner she'd created in the small space, she felt the first sharp pain of early labor. Ruby found her gripping the doorframe, breathing heavily through a contraction. "It's too early," Victoria gasped. "I'm only 37 weeks." "That's full term enough," Ruby said calmly, already reaching for her phone. "James, we need to get Victoria to the hospital now." The ride to St. Mary's Hospital passed in a blur of traffic lights and encouraging words from James and Ruby, who refused to leave her side. As another contraction hit, Victoria realized she wasn't facing this alone anymore. She had found something Sebastian's money could never buy, a real family built on genuine care and mutual support. In the delivery room hours later, as she prepared to meet her children, Victoria felt a strength she hadn't known she possessed. These babies would be born into love, not luxury, and somehow that felt like the greatest gift she could give them. Part 3. The twins and a growing dream Victoria's sons entered the world on a rainy October morning, their lusty cries filling the delivery room with beautiful chaos. Oliver arrived first, weighing 5 pounds and 2 ounces, followed 3 minutes later by Nathan at 5 pounds even. Despite their early arrival, Dr. Amanda Foster, the pediatrician on duty, assured Victoria that both boys were healthy and strong. "They're fighters, just like their mother," Dr. Foster said with a warm smile as she placed the twins in Victoria's arms for the first time. The doctor, a woman in her late 30s with an easy laugh and genuine compassion, would become one of Victoria's closest friends over the following months. James and Ruby were the first visitors, arriving with balloons, flowers, and enough baby supplies to stock a nursery. Grace Winters followed shortly after, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks as she held her honorary grandsons. "Your mother is going to raise you to be extraordinary young men," Grace whispered to the sleeping babies. "Mark my words." The transition back to the cafe proved challenging but manageable. Victoria learned to balance feedings, diaper changes, and work responsibilities with the efficiency of a military operation. The cafe's regular customers became honorary aunts and uncles, taking turns holding the babies while Victoria served coffee or managed the register. It was during one of these busy mornings that Victoria first noticed the cafe's declining profits. James, ever the artist, had little head for business, and Ruby, while excellent with people, struggled with the financial aspects. Victoria found herself staying up late after the boys were asleep, poring over invoices, supplier contracts, and sales reports. "We're losing money on the pastries," Victoria explained to James one evening, spreadsheets laid out across a cafe table. "The supplier is overcharging us and we're not pricing them competitively." James looked bewildered by the numbers, but Ruby leaned in with interest. "What do you suggest?" "I've researched 3 alternative suppliers. This one," Victoria pointed to a highlighted name, "offers better quality at 30% less cost. And if we adjust our pricing strategy and introduce a loyalty program, we could increase customer retention by at least 20%. The changes Victoria implemented over the following months transformed Canvas and Coffee from a struggling business into a thriving community hub. She negotiated better supplier contracts, introduced themed art nights that brought in new customers, and created an efficient inventory system that eliminated waste. Marcus Thompson, a young business mentor who frequently worked from the cafe, took notice of Victoria's innovations. "Have you ever considered business school?" he asked one afternoon, bouncing Nathan on his knee while Oliver slept in his carrier. "I never finished university," Victoria admitted, wiping down nearby tables. "Life got complicated." "Life's always complicated," Marcus replied thoughtfully. "But talent like yours shouldn't be wasted. There are programs for working mothers, evening classes, online courses. You're a natural entrepreneur, Victoria." That evening, after putting the twins to bed in their cozy upstairs apartment, Victoria sat at her small desk and researched business programs. The idea seemed impossible. A single mother with 2 infants, working full-time, with limited savings. But as she watched her sleeping sons, she realized that impossible dreams had become her specialty. Dr. Foster, during one of the boys' routine checkups, offered unexpected encouragement. "You know, I have a friend who's a professor at London Business School. She runs a scholarship program for women who've overcome significant challenges. I think you'd be a perfect candidate." 6 months after the twins' birth, Victoria submitted her first scholarship application. Her essay began simply, "18 months ago, I was abandoned at the altar, pregnant and penniless. Today, I'm a mother, an entrepreneur, and a woman who refuses to let circumstances define her future." As she sealed the envelope, Oliver began fussing from his crib. Victoria picked up her son, marveling at how much her life had changed. The woman who once measured her worth by a wealthy man's approval now saw her reflection in 2 perfect little faces and a thriving business she'd helped save. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but bright with possibility. 4 years had transformed Victoria Sterling from a broken bride into a formidable businesswoman. At 30, she possessed the sharp confidence of someone who had rebuilt her life from nothing. The scholarship to London Business School had opened. Doors she never knew existed, and her thesis on community-based business models had caught the attention of several investors. Oliver and Nathan, now energetic 4-year-olds with their mother's determined spirit and infectious curiosity, had adapted remarkably well to their unconventional upbringing. The cafe had become their playground, where they drew pictures for the walls and charmed customers with their bright smiles and precocious observations. "Mummy, why don't other cafes have painting corners like ours?" Oliver asked one morning, his small fingers covered in watercolor paint from the children's art station Victoria had installed. "Because not everyone thinks children should be encouraged to create," Victoria replied, kissing his forehead. "But we do things differently here, don't we?" That conversation sparked the idea that would change everything. Victoria realized that Canvas and Coffee's success came from its unique combination of art, community, and family-friendly atmosphere, a concept that could be replicated elsewhere. Enter Diana Chen, a brilliant marketing strategist who had discovered the cafe during a particularly stressful period in her corporate career. Diana, a sharp-witted woman in her early 30s with an MBA from Cambridge and a reputation for turning struggling brands into success stories, became a regular customer. before becoming Victoria's business partner. "You've created something special here," Diana said during their first formal meeting, gesturing around the bustling cafe where children played while their parents worked on laptops and local artists displayed their creations. "This isn't just a business. It's a community model that addresses real needs in urban environments." Together, they developed the concept for Artisan Corners, a chain of art-themed family cafes that would provide creative spaces for children, networking opportunities for parents, and exhibition platforms for local artists. Their business plan was ambitious: 10 locations across London within 3 years, with plans for national expansion. The challenge was funding. Traditional investors were skeptical of two women, one of whom was a single mother with no previous business ownership experience. Rejection followed rejection until Robert Hayes, a successful entrepreneur who had built and sold several tech companies, walked into Canvas and Coffee on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Robert, a soft-spoken man in his 50s with graying temples and kind eyes, had recently lost his wife to cancer and was searching for investment opportunities that would make a meaningful impact. He observed the cafe's operations for several hours, watching Victoria manage staff, interact with customers, and seamlessly handle the boys when they returned from nursery. "I've been in business for 30 years, Robert told Victoria and Diana during their presentation the following week. "I've seen a lot of pitches, a lot of fancy projections and market analyses, but I've rarely seen someone who understands their customers as intuitively as you do, Victoria. Your cafe doesn't just serve coffee, it serves community. That's invaluable." Robert's investment of $2 million allowed them to open their first 3 Artisan Corners locations simultaneously. Each cafe maintained the core concept while adapting to its neighborhood's unique character. The Hampstead location featured a poetry corner and hosted monthly literary events. The Greenwich Cafe emphasized maritime art and offered sailing lessons for children. The Shoreditch location showcased street art and hosted graffiti workshops. The success was immediate and overwhelming. Within 6 months, all 3 locations were profitable, with waiting lists for their popular Tiny Artists programs and Parent professional networks. Victoria found herself featured in business magazines, invited to speak at conferences, and courted by investors eager to fund further expansion. "Mummy's famous now," Nathan announced proudly to Dr. Foster during one of their regular checkups, pointing to Victoria's photo in a magazine article titled "London's Rising Female Entrepreneurs." Dr. Foster laughed, but her expression grew serious when she looked at Victoria. "Fame is wonderful, but don't forget to take care of yourself. Success can be as overwhelming as failure if you're not careful." Victoria appreciated the concern, but she felt more energized than exhausted. Each new location, each satisfied customer, each child who discovered their artistic passion in one of her cafes felt like vindication, not just of her business acumen, but of her worth as a person. Meanwhile, news of Sebastian's struggles had begun reaching her through industry publications. Cross Industries was facing a hostile takeover, their recent merger having failed spectacularly. Victoria felt no satisfaction in his misfortune, only a distant recognition of how dramatically their paths had diverged. She was building something lasting, something meaningful, and she was doing it entirely on her own terms. Part 5. The Triumphant. Returned 5 years after her public humiliation, Victoria Sterling stood before the mirror in her penthouse office overlooking the Thames, adjusting the tailored navy blazer that had become her signature look. At 31, she commanded respect in boardrooms across London as the CEO of Artisan Corners, now a 20-location empire valued at $50 million. The scared young woman who had once measured her worth by a man's approval had been replaced by a confident entrepreneur who had built her success through determination, innovation, and an unwavering commitment to her children. Oliver and Nathan, now confident 5-year-olds, burst into her office with the enthusiasm that had become legendary. among her staff. Both boys had inherited their mother's artistic sensibilities. Oliver gravitated toward music and had recently started piano lessons, while Nathan showed remarkable talent for visual arts, his drawings already decorating the walls of several cafe locations. "Mummy, Mrs. Chen says there's a big party tonight," Oliver announced, climbing onto her chair. "Are we going to meet more boring business people?" Victoria laughed, smoothing his dark hair. "Some of them might be boring, but tonight is special. We're celebrating something very important." The event was the annual London Business Excellence Awards, where Victoria was being honored as Entrepreneur of the Year. Grace Winters, now 85 but still sharp as ever, served as her official date and advisor. The elderly woman had watched Victoria's transformation with the pride of a mother seeing her daughter succeed beyond all expectations. "Are you nervous?" Grace asked as their limousine pulled up to the Savoy Hotel, where the ceremony was being held. "Should I be?" Victoria replied, checking her reflection one last time. She wore an elegant black gown that she had purchased herself. No borrowed finery, no desperate attempts to fit into someone else's world. This was her world now, built on her terms. The ballroom buzzed with conversation as London's business. Elite mingled over champagne and canapes. Victoria moved through the crowd with natural ease, no longer the insecure young woman who had once worried about saying the wrong thing. She was approached by journalists, potential investors, and other entrepreneurs seeking advice. It was near the bar that she encountered Jonathan Blake, the architect who had designed her company's new headquarters. Jonathan, a tall man with warm brown eyes and an easy smile, had been quietly pursuing Victoria for months, respecting her focus on business while making his interest clear through thoughtful gestures and professional collaboration that went beyond the call of duty. "You look radiant tonight," Jonathan said, offering her a glass of champagne. "Nervous about the speech?" "Excited, actually," Victoria replied honestly. 5 years ago, I couldn't have imagined standing in a room like this as anything other than someone's accessory. Tonight, I'm here because of what I've built." Their conversation was interrupted by a familiar voice that made Victoria's blood run cold. "Victoria, you look successful." She turned to find Sebastian Cross standing behind her, looking significantly older than his 34 years. His once pristine appearance showed signs of strain, deeper lines around his eyes, a slightly desperate edge to his practiced smile. The hostile takeover of Cross Industries had failed, but the attempt had left his company weakened and his personal reputation damaged. "Sebastian," Victoria replied coolly, noting how Jonathan stepped slightly closer in a protective gesture. "I heard about your business troubles. I'm sorry." "Are you?" Sebastian's voice carried a bitter edge. "You've certainly done well for yourself. 20 locations, I hear. Quite impressive for someone who used to serve coffee." The insult rolled off Victoria like water. "I still serve coffee, Sebastian. I just happen to own the places where it's served now." Sebastian's expression shifted, becoming the charming mask she remembered from their relationship. "Victoria, I've been thinking about us lately, about what we had. I made a mistake." "You made a choice," Victoria interrupted firmly. "And so did I. Every day for the past 5 years, I've chosen to build something meaningful rather than dwell on past disappointments." "The boys are my sons too," Sebastian said, playing what he clearly thought was his strongest card. "They deserve to know their father, to be part of the Cross family legacy.